Theodore Hood stood motionless before his father's mahogany casket at St. Michael's Cemetery, his tall frame rigid in his perfectly tailored black suit. At 42, he'd transformed Hood Construction from his father's modest local operation into a regional powerhouse that dominated the market. Yet Bernard Hood's approval had remained perpetually out of reach, a phantom that Theodore had chased relentlessly through boardrooms and construction sites. The autumn wind carried the scent of fresh earth and recently cut grass. His wife of 15 years, Kristen Barry, pressed herself against his side, her manicured fingers squeezing his arm in what appeared to be a gesture of comfort. Theodore noticed the unfamiliar scent of her perfume, a detail his mind filed away automatically, like the countless other minute observations that had helped him build his empire. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mr. Hood," muttered James Parker, one of the senior project managers who'd worked with Bernard for over 2 decades. The man's weathered face showed genuine grief as he shook Theodore's hand. "Thank you, James. Dad always spoke highly of you." Theodore's voice remained steady, controlled. He'd learned early in his career that success demanded perfect composure, even when delivering layoff notices or terminating multi-million-dollar contracts. The procession of mourners continued. Business associates in expensive suits mixed with construction workers in their Sunday best, all united in their respect for Bernard Hood. Theodore acknowledged each condolence with the appropriate combination of gratitude and solemnity, while his mind repeatedly returned to the peculiar circumstances of his father's death. "Your father was a great man," said Michael Chun, a longtime supplier. "He gave me my first contract when no one else would trust a new business. He had an eye for potential," Theodore replied, remembering how his father had built relationships with small suppliers, nurturing them into reliable partners. It was one of the many lessons Theodore had learned and expanded upon. As the crowd thinned, Theodore caught snippets of hushed conversations among the remaining mourners. So sudden. He was in such good shape. Ran every morning, didn't he? Never missed a day, rain or shine. Their words echoed Theodore's own doubts. The medical examiner had ruled it a heart attack, but the conclusion hadn't sat right with him. Bernard had been extraordinarily fit for his 68 years, maintaining a strict routine of 5-mile runs every morning. Theodore had always admired that dedication, even as he'd struggled to earn his father's approval in other areas. Sarah Martinez, his executive assistant, approached with red-rimmed eyes. "Mr. Hood, I've rescheduled all your meetings for the next week. The Morgan contract review can wait." "No," Theodore said firmly. "Keep tomorrow's meeting. Dad wouldn't want the business to suffer." He saw approval in Sarah's eyes. She'd worked with him long enough to understand that work was his anchor. The last of the mourners departed, leaving Theodore alone with Kristen. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his ear. The unfamiliar perfume was stronger now, expensive and slightly cloying. "You know why he had that heart attack?" she whispered, her voice carrying an unfamiliar edge that made Theodore's instinct surge to attention. "He caught me and your brother in his bed." Theodore's mind immediately began calculating, analyzing, but his face remained impassive. Years of high-stakes negotiations had taught him the value of an unreadable expression. "But that's not the best part," Kristen continued, her words dripping with malice. "I've been poisoning your coffee for months, just like I did to him." She paused, savoring the moment. "Too bad you already drank today's cup." Theodore turned to face her fully, his 6'2" frame towering over her. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth as he reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone. With deliberate slowness, he held up the screen, showing her the active recording. "The police loved your confession," he said, his voice carrying the same tone he used when crushing competitors. "By the way, that coffee? I switched our cups." The color drained from Kristen's face, her carefully applied makeup now a mask of horror. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. "You should have learned more about me before you tried this," Theodore continued, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't lose. Ever." Kristen stumbled backward, her heel catching in the soft grass. Theodore didn't move to help her regain her balance. How long have you known?" she managed to whisper. "Long enough to ensure you and Floyd won't escape the consequences." He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe his father had given him when Hood Construction landed its first major contract. The police should be processing the evidence from our house right now. Every cup of coffee you doctored, every conversation you had with Floyd, all documented. You can't prove anything, Kristen said, but her voice trembled. Theodore's laugh was cold. You'd be surprised what money and connections can prove. Did you really think you could conspire with Floyd under my roof without me noticing? I built a billion-dollar company by paying attention to details. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You killed my father. You tried to kill me. Did you really think I'd let you live happily ever after with my worthless brother? Kristen's face contorted with rage. Your father was a controlling bastard, just like you. Floyd is twice the man you'll ever be. Floyd is a weak, pathetic parasite, Theodore replied calmly. And now he's a murderer's accomplice. I wonder how he'll handle prison. He couldn't even handle working a regular job. A police siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. Kristen's eyes widened with panic. You should run, Theodore suggested, his tone conversational. It won't help, but it might make things more interesting. He smiled, the expression reminiscent of a predator. I do enjoy a good chase. As Kristen turned to flee, Theodore remained by his father's casket, perfectly composed. He placed a hand on the smooth wood. I learned from you, Dad, he murmured. Never show weakness. Never forgive betrayal. And never, ever leave loose ends. He watched as two police cars pulled up to the cemetery entrance, their lights flashing. Detective Valerie Wood stepped out of the first car, her badge glinting in the autumn sun. She caught Theodore's eye and nodded slightly. Theodore straightened his tie and prepared to give his statement. The game was just beginning, and he intended to savor every moment of his revenge. 3 weeks before Bernard Hood's death, Theodore sat in his home office, reviewing security footage on multiple monitors. The cameras had been installed discreetly throughout his house, their presence known only to him and the elite security firm he'd hired. On one screen, Floyd Hood paced nervously in the dining room, waiting for their weekly family dinner to begin. Theodore leaned back in his leather chair, studying his younger brother's movements. At 39, Floyd still possessed the boyish good looks that had helped him charm his way out of countless problems, but years of hard living had left their mark. His designer clothes hung slightly loose on his frame, and his hands trembled as he checked his phone repeatedly. Sir, Sarah Martinez's voice came through the intercom. Your wife asked me to remind you about dinner. Thank you, Sarah. You can head home now. Theodore switched off the intercom and rose, adjusting his cuffs. He'd kept his regular office hours despite it being Sunday, another lesson from his father about dedication. The dining room was a study in understated luxury, with an antique mahogany table that could seat 16. Tonight, only 4 places were set. Theodore took his usual position at the head of the table, nodding to his father who sat at the opposite end. You're late, Bernard said sharply. The market doesn't run itself on weekends. No, it doesn't, Theodore agreed. The Morgan contract needed revisions. Bernard's expression softened slightly. The shopping center development? Good. That's a $50 million project. 65 after the revisions, Theodore corrected, noting how Floyd's shoulders tensed at the casual mention of such large sums. Kristen entered from the kitchen, carrying a serving dish. I made your favorite, Bernard. Beef Wellington. Thoughtful of you, Bernard replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. Theodore watched the interaction carefully. Something was off about Kristen's solicitous behavior toward his father, just as something was wrong about the way Floyd couldn't seem to look directly at either of them. How's the job search going, Floyd? Bernard asked as Kristen served the food. Floyd's fork clattered against his plate. Actually, I've got some promising leads. A friend of mine knows someone in commercial real estate. Another friend with connections? Theodore interrupted. Like the friend who convinced you to invest in that Bitcoin scheme last year. That was a legitimate opportunity, Floyd protested. The timing was just wrong. The timing's always wrong with you, isn't it? Theodore took a sip of wine. How much was it again? 200,000 from your trust fund? Boys, Bernard warned, but there was weariness in his voice rather than authority. Theodore noticed Kristen's hand brush Floyd's shoulder as she passed behind him. a gesture too intimate for a sister-in-law. His suspicions, already aroused by their recent behavior, crystallized into certainty. "Tell me, Floyd," Theodore said pleasantly, "how do you afford those Ferragamo shoes on unemployment? They're from this season's collection, aren't they?" Floyd shifted uncomfortably. "I had some savings." "Savings?" Theodore laughed. "You burned through your trust fund on get-rich-quick schemes and gambling. The only savings you've ever had came from Dad bailing you out." "That's enough," Bernard interjected. "We're having dinner as a family." Theodore met his father's gaze. "Family? Is that what we're calling it now?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Kristen busied herself with her food, while Floyd drained his wine glass and immediately reached for the bottle. "How's the new project in Portland progressing?" Bernard asked, clearly attempting to change the subject. "On schedule and under budget," Theodore replied. Unlike Floyd's last attempt at joining the business. "What was the final cost overrun on that warehouse project?" $3 million. "I had supply chain issues," Floyd muttered. "You had competence issues," Theodore corrected. "The same issues you've had your entire life. Always looking for shortcuts, always expecting Dad to clean up your messes." Bernard set down his fork with deliberate care. "I said that's enough, Theodore. Your brother's trying to get back on his feet." "He's been trying to get back on his feet for 20 years, Theodore responded. "Meanwhile, I've turned your company into one of the largest construction firms in the region. But please, keep defending him. Keep enabling his failures." Floyd stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Dad's golden boy, the big success story. You have no idea what's really going on around you." Theodore smiled coldly. "Don't I?" Kristen laid a hand on Floyd's arm. "Honey, sit down, please." The endearment hung in the air like smoke. Bernard's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as he looked between his younger son and his daughter-in-law. Theodore watched the scene unfold with calculated interest. Floyd's face had gone pale, while Kristen seemed to realize her mistake too late. "I think," Theodore said quietly, "this dinner is over." He stood and walked to his home office, closing the door behind him. Through the security feeds, he watched as Floyd practically ran from the house, followed shortly by Kristen. Bernard sat alone at the table for a long time, his face a mask of confusion and growing suspicion. Theodore picked up his phone and dialed a number from memory. "Roger? I need your services. Something's wrong in my house, and I want to know everything." He paused, listening. "Yes, everything. Whatever it costs. I want cameras, bugs, the works. And I want it done yesterday." He ended the call and turned back to the monitors, watching as his father finally rose from the table and walked slowly toward the front door. Bernard's posture showed his age for the first time Theodore could remember. "I warned you about Floyd," Theodore murmured to the empty room. "I warned you every time you bailed him out, every time you gave him another chance. Now look what it's cost you." He opened his laptop and began composing an email to his private investigator. Whatever was happening in his house, whatever scheme Floyd and Kristen were planning, he would uncover it. And when he did, there would be no mercy. Theodore Hood didn't believe in second chances. He believed in consequences. Detective Valerie Woods' office at the police department was a testament to organized chaos. Case files covered every available surface, crime scene photos were pinned to a large corkboard, and her desk supported 3 computer monitors displaying different aspects of the Hood investigation. Theodore sat across from her, his posture relaxed but alert. He'd chosen the chair that gave him the clearest view of both the door and the detective's face, another habit born from years of business negotiations. "The toxicology reports came back," Valerie said, sliding a folder across her desk. "The coffee samples you provided tested positive for a sophisticated cocktail of poisons. Whoever designed this knew what they were doing. The combination was specifically chosen to mimic heart disease symptoms over time." "My wife has a master's degree in biochemistry," Theodore replied. "She left that career to play trophy wife, but clearly she kept up with her studies." Valerie nodded, making a note in her file. "And you said you began collecting samples when?" 2 weeks ago, after I noticed unusual behavior from both Kristen and my brother during our weekly family dinners. I had my security team install cameras in my home office, where I keep my coffee maker. The footage showed Kristen adding substances to my morning coffee on multiple occasions. That's when you started switching the cups? Theodore's smile was sharp. I've made it a habit never to drink anything Kristen prepares. I've been collecting samples and having them tested privately for weeks. The results matched what your lab found. Valerie leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. Mr. Hood, your wife and brother have disappeared. They cleaned out their accounts yesterday morning. We found evidence of extensive planning, fake passports, offshore accounts, the works. They'd been preparing this for months. Of course they had, Theodore said calmly. Floyd never could handle money, but Kristen's always been clever. She would have known they'd need an escape plan. There's more. Valerie spread several photographs across her desk. Your brother had significant gambling debts to Guillermo Carey. Theodore examined the photos. They showed Floyd entering and leaving an upscale building known to house one of Carey's illegal casinos. How significant? 7 figures, Valerie replied. Our sources suggest the original plan was to inherit the company and sell it to cover the debts. Your father discovering their affair forced them to accelerate their timeline. Theodore absorbed this information with the same analytical detachment he applied to business decisions. Guillermo Carey. He owns several legitimate businesses in addition to his gambling operations, correct? Mr. Hood. Valerie's voice carried a warning tone. Whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking about justice, detective. My father was murdered. My wife and brother tried to kill me. Surely you don't expect me to sit idle while they escape? I expect you to let law enforcement handle this, Valerie said firmly. We have alerts at airports and border crossings. We'll find them. Theodore stood, straightening his jacket. Of course, detective. I have complete faith in your investigation. Valerie rose as well, her expression skeptical. Why don't I believe you? Because you're good at your job, Theodore replied honestly. But ask yourself this. If they've been planning this for months, do you really think airport alerts will stop them? They'll have multiple escape routes planned. And you think you can find them when we can't? Theodore moved to the door, then paused. Detective, do you know how I built Hood Construction into what it is today? By understanding that every person has a price, every system has a weakness, and every plan has a flaw. Floyd and Kristen might have planned their escape for months, but I've spent decades learning how to hunt and eliminate threats to my business. Is that a confession, Mr. Hood? It's a statement of fact, Theodore replied. My father taught me that business isn't just about construction. It's about power, connections, and knowing how to use both. The detective crossed her arms. Your father's lessons seem to have shaped you significantly, more than he ever knew. Theodore's expression hardened. He kept trying to save Floyd, to rehabilitate him. Every time Floyd failed, every time he stole or gambled away opportunities, our father forgave him. That forgiveness killed him. And you won't make the same mistake? Valerie watched him carefully. Detective Woods, let me be clear. I won't do anything illegal. I don't need to. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. This contains evidence of every embezzlement scheme Floyd and Kristen ran through my company. Bank transfers, falsified contracts, shell companies, all of it. I've been collecting evidence for weeks. Valerie took the folder. How did you know to start looking? Because I know Floyd. He's never changed since we were kids. Always taking, always destroying. The only difference is the scale. Theodore straightened his tie. The day I noticed him looking too comfortable in my house was the day I started digging. Your own brother, Valerie mused. And you felt nothing when you started investigating him? Theodore's laugh was devoid of humor. What I feel is irrelevant. Floyd and Kristen murdered my father. They tried to murder me. Feelings don't enter into it. He moved to leave again, but stopped at Valerie's voice. One more question, Mr. Hood. The recording from the funeral. You knew she would confess, didn't you? You orchestrated that moment. Theodore turned back, his expression unreadable. Detective, in business, timing is everything. The best deals happen when you can predict your opponent's moves before they make them. And your wife was just another business opponent? No. Theodore's voice was cold. She was a threat, and I eliminate threats. He gestured to the folder in her hands. Everything you need is in there. Bank records, surveillance footage, witness statements from my employees who caught them doctoring documents. Use it well. As Theodore left the police station, his phone buzzed. A text from Roger Connor. Found something. Dinner tonight? Theodore smiled as he got into his car. The investigation had given him what he needed, official documentation of their crimes. Now the real hunt could begin. He dialed his office. Sarah, clear my schedule for the next month. Family emergency. He paused. And get me everything you can find on Guillermo Carey's legitimate businesses. I think it's time Hood Construction explored some new investment opportunities. The autumn sun was setting as Theodore drove away from the police station, his mind already formulating plans. His father had taught him the construction business, but Theodore had learned something else along the way, the art of methodically dismantling enemies. Floyd and Kristen thought they were running from the police, but they were about to learn a harsh truth. There are worse things to run from than law enforcement. Theodore Hood didn't forgive betrayal, and he never left loose ends. He would find them, and when he did, they would understand exactly why competitors called him the architect of destruction behind closed doors. Because Theodore didn't just build empires, he destroyed them too, piece by carefully calculated piece. The private dining room at the St. Charles Club embodied old money and discretion. Theodore Hood sat across from Roger Connor, his former college roommate who now ran Sentinel Security, a firm specializing in what Roger delicately called complicated situations. You look exactly the same as you did at Harvard, Roger remarked, cutting into his Wagyu steak. Still the most intense guy in the room. Theodore took a measured sip of water. He hadn't touched alcohol since discovering Kristen's poisoning attempt. I need your best people, Roger. My brother and wife have disappeared with company assets. Roger's jovial expression shifted to professional focus. How much are we talking about? Enough to make it worth your while. Theodore placed a thick envelope on the table. This is just the retainer. I want everything, surveillance, phone records, financial tracking. And I want someone who can find people who don't want to be found. Roger picked up the envelope without checking its contents. I know just the person. Melvin Head, former CIA, specializes in fugitive recovery. He's not cheap. Neither am I. Theodore's voice carried the same tone he used when acquiring failing companies. I want him on this exclusively. Roger nodded, pulling out his phone. After a brief conversation, he looked up. He can meet us here in 30 minutes. Good. Theodore straightened his tie. While we wait, tell me about your international capabilities. Particularly in Mexico. Roger's eyebrows rose slightly. You already have a lead? I have suspicions. Floyd's never been creative. He always runs to the same places, uses the same patterns. The question isn't where they've gone. It's who's helping them get there. Melvin had arrived precisely on schedule. He was unremarkable in appearance, medium height, medium build, graying hair. Exactly what you'd want in someone whose job was to disappear into crowds while tracking targets. Mr. Hood, Melvin said, taking a seat. Roger briefed me on the basics. You're looking for two fugitives, your wife and brother. Correct. Theodore pulled out a tablet, displaying photos of Floyd and Kristen. They've embezzled company funds and are implicated in my father's murder. The police are involved, but they're moving too slowly. Melvin studied the photos with professional detachment. Any idea of their resources? They cleaned out several accounts totaling approximately $4 million. They have false identities arranged through connections to Guillermo Carey's organization. Theodore watched Melvin's reaction carefully at the mention of Carey's name. The casino owner? Melvin's expression remained neutral. That complicates things. His network is extensive. So is mine. Theodore pulled up more documents on his tablet. I want daily reports. Every credit card transaction, every phone call, every security camera they appear on. I want to know where they sleep, what they eat, and who they talk to. Melvin nodded slowly. It won't be cheap, tracking them internationally. Money isn't an issue. Results are. Theodore's voice hardened. Find them. Over the next week, Theodore established a command center in a secure office at Hood Construction's headquarters. Multiple screens displayed financial data, travel records, and surveillance feeds. Sarah Martinez coordinated with Melvin's team. maintaining a detailed timeline of Floyd and Kristen's movements. "Sir," Sarah called out one morning. "Melvin's on line 1? Theodore picked up immediately. "Report. Your brother's not as clever as he thinks." Melvin's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "They're using false identities arranged by one of Guillermo's associates, but they made mistakes. Kristen used her personal credit card at a gas station in Mexico City 3 days ago." "Amateur move," Theodore murmured. "She's getting sloppy. There's more. They've been moving money through a series of shell companies, but the pattern is traceable. I recommend bringing in a forensic accountant." Theodore smiled. "Already done. Cora Bennett starts tomorrow." Cora arrived early the next morning, her reputation for financial investigation preceding her. She'd helped Theodore evaluate numerous acquisitions, known for finding irregularities that others missed. "I need everything," Theodore told her, providing access to the company's financial records. "Every transaction, every contract, every subsidiary. Find out how deep this goes." Cora worked methodically, her fingers flying over her keyboard as she traced money through a labyrinth of accounts and shell companies. After 3 days of intense analysis, she requested a meeting. "They've been clever," she admitted, spreading documents across Theodore's desk, "but not clever enough. Floyd and Kristen have been siphoning money from the company for months through a sophisticated scheme involving subcontractors." Theodore examined the documentation. "Show me." "They created fake companies that appeared to be legitimate subcontractors. Your company would pay them for services never rendered, and the money would be routed through a series of shells before ending up in accounts they controlled. How did they hide this from our auditors?" "The paperwork was perfect. Invoices, delivery confirmations, everything. Someone with inside knowledge of your company's processes helped set this up." Cora hesitated. "The interesting part is where the shell companies were registered. They all have connections to Guillermo Carey's legitimate businesses." Theodore leaned back, his expression darkening. "How much total?" "Conservative estimate? 12 million over the past year." Cora pulled up more documents. "But here's what's crucial. The paper trail implicates Carey's businesses in money laundering. If this documentation were to reach the authorities—" "It won't," Theodore interrupted. "Not yet. This is leverage." Cora studied him carefully. "Mr. Hood, Guillermo Carey is dangerous. His legitimate businesses are just a front. The stories about what happens to people who cross him. I'm counting on his reputation." Theodore stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. "Fear is useful, Cora. It makes people predictable. Carey fears exposure more than he fears anything else. His entire empire depends on maintaining a legitimate facade. What are you planning?" "I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse." Theodore turned back to her. "I want every piece of documentation showing connections between his businesses and these shell companies. Every transaction, every registration, every point of contact. Make it ironclad." Cora nodded slowly. "It'll take a few days to compile everything properly. You have to." "And Cora?" His voice carried a clear warning. "This stays between us. If anyone asks, you're doing routine audit work." After she left, Theodore called Roger. "I need a meeting with Guillermo Carey." "Make it happen." "Are you insane?" Roger's voice cracked slightly. "The man's a psychopath. He once had a guy's fingers cut off for shorting him $5,000. Then he'll understand the importance of protecting his investments." Theodore's tone remained even. "Set it up, Roger. Use whatever connections you need." "This is a bad idea, Theo. A really bad idea." "No, Roger. This is business." Theodore ended the call and turned back to the financial documents. Everything was falling into place. Floyd and Kristen thought they were clever, using Carey's network to hide. They didn't realize they'd given Theodore exactly what he needed to destroy them all. Guillermo Carey's official business headquarters occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise. The decor screamed new money. Lots of gold trim and modern art that had clearly been chosen for price rather than taste. Theodore noted the security cameras covering every angle and the subtle bulges under the jackets of the men positioned strategically around the reception area. "Mr. Carey will see you now," the receptionist announced. Theodore followed a suited guard through double doors into Carey's inner sanctum. The office was designed to intimidate, Massive desk, artwork worth millions, and windows offering a god's-eye view of the city below. Guillermo Carey rose as Theodore entered. He was shorter than Theodore had expected, but his presence filled the room. His tailored suit couldn't quite hide the street fighter's physique underneath. Mr. Hood, Carey's accent carried hints of his Mexican heritage. This is an unexpected pleasure. I wasn't aware Hood Construction had interests in the entertainment industry. We're always looking to diversify, Theodore replied smoothly, accepting the offered seat. Your development projects have caught our attention. Carey's smile was practiced. Of course. Though I have to wonder why Hood Construction CEO came personally. Usually, these initial meetings are handled by development teams. Usually, Theodore agreed, opening his briefcase. But this isn't a usual situation. He placed a thick folder on Carey's desk. The other man made no move to open it. What exactly are we discussing, Mr. Hood? Mutual interests. Theodore leaned forward slightly. You've been helping my brother and his lover hide. They're using infrastructure you provided, false identities, safe houses, transportation networks. Very professional. Carey's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. I'm not sure what you're talking about. No. Theodore opened the folder himself, spreading out documents. These shell companies that have been siphoning money from Hood Construction. They're registered to addresses owned by your legitimate businesses. The money laundering scheme is quite sophisticated. I'm impressed. Mr. Hood, Carey's voice carried a deadly edge. You're making very dangerous accusations. Not accusations. Observations. Theodore remained perfectly calm. The police would be very interested in this documentation. But I'm a businessman. I believe we can help each other. Guillermo studied him with cold eyes before nodding slowly. What do you want? Information. And when the time comes, I want you to do nothing. Nothing? When I find Floyd and Kristen, and I will find them. I don't want any interference from your organization. No warnings, no help, no resources. Carey leaned back, steepling his fingers. And in return? This evidence disappears. Theodore gestured to the documents. Your legitimate businesses remain legitimate. Everyone wins. Except your brother and his woman. They're not your concern anymore. Theodore's voice carried absolute certainty. They've caused you enough trouble. Floyd's gambling debts, the money laundering scheme that could expose your entire operation. They're a liability. Carey was silent for a long moment, evaluating. Finally, he opened a drawer and removed a flash drive. Everything you need is here. Their current identities, locations of safe houses, contact protocols. But Mr. Hood, his eyes glittered dangerously. If any of those documents ever surface, they won't. Theodore pocketed the drive. As long as you uphold your end, you're either very brave or very stupid. Coming here like this, Theodore stood, straightening his jacket. Neither. I'm just thorough. You should know. I have multiple copies of everything in that folder, set to be released automatically if anything happens to me. Of course you do. Carey's smile was genuine this time. You know, in different circumstances, we could have done business together. We just did. Theodore moved to the door, then paused. One more thing, I know about the support they're getting from your operation in Mexico City. That ends now. Carey picked up his phone as Theodore left. The message would be sent. Floyd and Kristen were on their own now. In the elevator, Theodore allowed himself a small smile. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Floyd and Kristen thought they were safe under Carey's protection. They were about to learn how quickly that safety could vanish. The coastal town of Puerto Vallarta sparkled in the Mexican sun, tourists and locals mingling on the streets below as Theodore watched through high-powered binoculars from his hotel room balcony. After a week of surveillance, he'd established Floyd and Kristen's patterns with military precision. They were staying in a rented villa under the names James and Sarah Mitchell, burning through their stolen money while planning their escape to South America. Theodore's team had confirmed tickets purchased to Brazil under different aliases, a journey they would never complete. Movement at the villa. Melvin's voice crackled through Theodore's earpiece. Target 1 is heading to his usual bar. Target 2 is preparing for her morning walk. Theodore checked his watch. 10:15 a.m. Right on schedule. Floyd's drinking had gotten worse since they'd fled, starting earlier each day. Kristen had taken to long walks alone on the beach, perhaps trying to escape the reality of what their lives had become. Maintain surveillance on Target 1, Theodore instructed. I'll handle Target 2, sir. Melvin's tone carried a warning. We should stick to the plan. Let the local authorities. The plan has changed. Theodore's voice brooked no argument. Just make sure Floyd stays at that bar. He waited until Kristen was halfway through her usual route before making his move. She'd chosen a relatively isolated stretch of beach, away from the tourist crowds. Her head was down, lost in thought, when Theodore stepped into her path. Hello, Kristen. She froze, then turned slowly. The weeks on the run had taken their toll. Her designer clothes looked worn, her carefully maintained appearance showing signs of strain. How did you find us? I had help. The same way I had help gathering evidence of every crime you and Floyd committed. The embezzlement, the murders. He stepped closer, noting how she instinctively backed away. Did you really think you could take everything from me and just disappear? You don't understand. Kristen's voice shook slightly. Floyd and I. Floyd and you what? Theodore's laugh was cold. Thought you could kill my father. Try to kill me. Steal my company? Please, explain what I don't understand about that. Your father was controlling everything. The company should have been shared equally. Floyd deserved nothing. Theodore cut her off. He's a parasite. Always has been. And you? You're worse. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed yourself. The brilliant biochemist who gave up her career to play trophy wife, only to become a murderer. Kristen's eyes darted around, looking for escape routes. What are you going to do? Me? Nothing. Theodore smiled, the expression devoid of warmth. I'm just here to watch your world collapse. You see, Guillermo Carey sends his regards. Or rather, he sends nothing at all. No more support, no more protection, no more resources. The color drained from Kristen's face. You're lying. Guillermo wouldn't. Guillermo is a businessman. You and Floyd became bad investments. Theodore pulled out his phone, showing her surveillance photos. We know about the tickets to Brazil. We know about the money you've hidden. We know everything. Those tickets. Kristen's voice trailed off as realization dawned. Floyd booked those without telling me. Did he? Theodore's tone was conversational. Interesting. Just like he's been moving money from your shared accounts without consulting you. Kristen's expression shifted. What are you talking about? Check your phone. Check the accounts. Go ahead. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands, accessing their banking apps. Theodore watched as the blood drained from her face. No, she whispered. He wouldn't. He already has. While you've been taking your morning walks, Floyd's been making preparations. Single ticket to Brazil. Personal accounts in his name only. Even that villa you're staying in, the lease expires tomorrow. Kristen stared at her phone, tears forming in her eyes. I trusted him. Like I trusted you? Theodore's voice was razor-sharp. The difference is, I learned from my mistake. You're still making yours. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Kristen? When Floyd gets back from the bar, don't mention this conversation. Don't tell him you know about his plans. Just watch him. Watch how he lies to your face, just like you lied to mine. Wait, Kristen called out. What am I supposed to do? Theodore didn't turn back. You're intelligent. Figure it out. But remember, the police are looking for both of you. And now you have no friends, no resources, and no protection. Tick-tock, Kristen. Tick-tock. He walked away, leaving her standing alone on the beach. Through his earpiece, he heard Melvin's update. Target 1 is on his 6th drink. Getting belligerent with the bartender. Good, Theodore replied. Make sure he stays there. I want him nice and paranoid when he gets back to find Kristen acting strangely. The next few hours unfolded exactly as Theodore had planned. Through his surveillance network, he watched the psychological warfare take effect. Kristen returned to the villa, her mind poisoned with doubt about Floyd's loyalty. Every time Floyd slurred his words or checked his phone, her suspicion grew visible in her tense posture and darting glances. Sir, Melvin's voice came through the earpiece again. We've confirmed Target 1 made 3 more attempts to access the Brazilian accounts. He's getting sloppy with the passwords. Of course he is, Theodore replied, watching through high-powered cameras from his hotel room. Fear makes people careless. Keep monitoring their communications. I want to know the moment either of them makes a move. The sun began to set over Porto Vallarta, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. In the villa below, Theodore could see Floyd and Kristen moving through their evening routine, each watching the other while pretending not to. The pressure was building, just as he'd engineered. Mr. Hood, Melvin's tone was professional but concerned. Local authorities are getting increasingly interested in the villa. Our contacts can only deflect them for so long. They won't need to. Theodore checked his watch. By this time tomorrow, Floyd and Kristen will have imploded all on their own. Sometimes the best weapon is truth, Melvin. I just had to make sure they both got a taste of it. He turned from the window and began packing his surveillance equipment. Everything was in motion now. The seeds of doubt planted, the escape routes closed off, the pressure mounting. Floyd and Kristen's alliance of convenience would soon shatter under the weight of their mutual distrust and desperation. Theodore Hood hadn't just found his targets, he'd orchestrated their complete psychological isolation. Now all that remained was to watch as they tore each other apart, their guilt and paranoia doing his work for him. Sir? Sarah's voice came through on a secure line. Detective Woods is asking for an update on our internal investigation. Tell her we're fully cooperating with law enforcement. Theodore replied smoothly. And Sarah? Make sure our documentation about Floyd and Kristen's embezzlement is ready. Things are about to get very interesting. As night fell over Porto Vallarta, Theodore watched his brother and wife through the surveillance feeds, trapped in their gilded cage, each believing they could outsmart the other. They had no idea they were merely players in his carefully orchestrated game of destruction. The hunt was over. The trap was set, and Theodore had never failed to eliminate his targets. He just sometimes preferred to let them eliminate each other first. Theodore sat in his temporary office in Porto Vallarta, methodically arranging the evidence he'd prepared for Kristen. Bank statements showing transfers to accounts only Floyd could access. Travel documents indicating a single ticket to Brazil. Hotel reservations for one. Each piece carefully selected and doctored to tell a compelling story of betrayal. Melvin's voice came through the secure line. Target 2 is approaching her usual walking route. Are you sure about this, sir? We could simply alert the authorities. No, Theodore replied, gathering the documents into a leather portfolio. I want them to destroy each other. It's more fitting. He'd chosen his location carefully, a secluded stretch of beach where Kristen often paused to rest during her morning walks. As he approached, he noticed the signs of strain in her appearance. Her designer clothes hung loose, her carefully maintained image showing cracks under the pressure of life as a fugitive. Good morning, Kristen, Theodore called out, enjoying how she jumped at his voice. Ready to have a real conversation? I have nothing to say to you. Her voice trembled despite her attempt at defiance. No. Theodore opened the portfolio. Not even about how Floyd's been planning to abandon you. That seems worth discussing. Her eyes darted to the documents in his hands. You're lying. Am I? He handed her the first bank statement. See for yourself. Notice the pattern of transfers? Small amounts, moved gradually to avoid attention. Just like you taught him when you were embezzling from my company. Kristen's hands shook as she examined the papers. These could be fake. They could be, Theodore agreed. But you know they're not. You've seen how Floyd's been acting. The secret of phone calls. The unexplained absences. The way he guards his phone. He paused, letting the doubt sink in. Deep down, you already know he's planning to betray you. Why are you showing me this? Theodore extracted more documents from his portfolio. Because I'm offering you a choice. One you don't deserve, but one I'm making anyway. He handed her photographs showing Floyd meeting with various contacts. Confess to everything. Testify against Floyd and Guillermo. Do that, and I'll ensure you serve your time in a comfortable minimum security facility. And if I refuse? Then stay with Floyd. Theodore's voice turned cold. Watch him drain your accounts and disappear. And spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, knowing I'll never stop hunting you. Kristen stared at the ocean, her mind visibly racing. How do I know you'll keep your word about the minimum security prison? Because unlike your lover, I understand the value of keeping promises. Theodore produced a burner phone. Everything you need is programmed into this phone. One number, directly to Detective Woods. Why are you really doing this? Kristen asked, taking the phone with trembling fingers. Because watching you and Floyd tear each other apart will be far more satisfying than simply turning you in. Theodore checked his watch. You have 24 hours. Use them wisely. He turned to leave, but Kristen called after him. What happens after 24 hours? Then I release everything to the authorities. The embezzlement records, the murder evidence, everything. He didn't turn back. And Kristen? Don't try to warn Floyd. My people are watching. One wrong move and the deal is off. Theodore returned to his temporary office, where Melvin waited with surveillance updates. Target 1 remains at the villa, Melvin reported. He's been making calls all morning. Seems agitated. Of course he is, Theodore replied, pouring himself coffee. He knows his escape window is closing. Has he checked the Brazilian accounts today? 3 times in the last hour. Good. Theodore smiled coldly. Make sure our people keep him occupied when he tries to leave the villa. I want him frustrated, paranoid, and drinking heavily by the time Kristen returns. Over the next several hours, Theodore watched through surveillance feeds as his plan unfolded. Kristen returned to the villa, the burner phone hidden in her purse, doubt eating away at her composure. Floyd, already on his 4th drink, grew increasingly agitated as his attempts to leave the villa were thwarted by mysterious car problems and suddenly closed roads. Sir, Sarah's voice came through on the secure line. Detective Woods is asking if we should have local authorities on standby. Not yet, Theodore replied. First, we let them simmer. Fear and paranoia are powerful weapons, Sarah. Sometimes the anticipation of betrayal is more destructive than the betrayal itself. He watched the psychological damage spread through the evening. Every time Floyd checked his phone, Kristen's suspicion grew. Every time Kristen glanced at her purse, Floyd's paranoia intensified. They were trapped in a cage of mutual distrust, exactly as Theodore had planned. You taught me well, Dad, Theodore murmured, watching the feeds. Never forgive betrayal. Just make sure the punishment fits the crime. The 24-hour deadline was approaching its end when Kristen finally broke. Theodore watched through surveillance cameras as she retrieved the burner phone from its hiding place in the villa's bathroom. Her hands trembled as she dialed the program number. Detective Woods, Kristen's voice was barely a whisper. I want to make a deal. Floyd, drunk and paranoid from a day of thwarted escape attempts, had followed her. He stood in the bathroom doorway, his face contorted with rage. What deal? Kristen spun around, dropping the phone. Floyd. You treacherous bitch. Floyd lunged forward, his alcoholic haze turning to violent fury. You're going to betray me? After everything? Theodore watched the scene unfold through multiple camera angles, each one capturing the moment Kristen's facade of loyalty shattered. Betray you? She screamed back. Like you were planning to betray me? I saw the bank transfers, Floyd. The ticket to Brazil, just one ticket. Floyd's face shifted from rage to calculation. Theodore got to you, didn't he? Showed you some papers, made you think I was planning to run? Were they lies? Kristen demanded. Tell me those accounts don't exist. Tell me you haven't been moving money behind my back. Instead of answering, Floyd grabbed for the phone. Kristen pulled away, and the argument turned physical. They grappled in the confined space, knocking over expensive toiletries and shattering the bathroom mirror. Sir, Melvin's voice was urgent in Theodore's earpiece. Should we intervene? Not yet, Theodore replied, watching as years of mistrust and resentment exploded between his wife and brother. Let them reveal everything first. Floyd had Kristen pinned against the wall, his hand at her throat. You think Theodore's offering you a deal? He's playing you, just like he's played everyone his entire life. At least he's honest about being ruthless. Kristen choked out. You pretend to be the victim while you're stealing and plotting. Shut up. Floyd slammed her against the wall again. You helped plan all of it. the embezzlement, the poison. It was your idea, and you went along with everything. Kristen's voice was hoarse but defiant. Because you were too weak to stand up to Theodore on your own. Too weak to earn anything for yourself. Theodore leaned forward, recording everything. Every confession, every accusation. All evidence that would ensure neither of them ever saw freedom again. The fighting grew more intense. Floyd, enraged by Kristen's words, threw her into the shower door. Glass shattered, and blood began to flow. But Kristen, running on desperate survival instinct, fought back. She grabbed a broken mirror shard and slashed at Floyd's face. Now, Theodore commanded into his radio. Move in now. Police sirens wailed in the distance as Floyd, bleeding from a facial wound, released Kristen and ran from the bathroom. She crumpled to the floor, coughing and clutching her throat. Theodore watched through exterior cameras as Floyd burst out of the villa, wild-eyed and blood-streaked. Police vehicles converged on the property, but Floyd ran toward the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Don't let him jump, Theodore ordered the tactical team. I want him alive to face everything. The chase was brief but dramatic. Floyd, trapped between the advancing police and the cliff edge, finally broke completely. You want a confession? He screamed, not realizing Theodore could hear everything through the surveillance equipment. Fine. We killed him. We killed Dad because he was going to cut me off. Because he finally realized what a disappointment I was. Theodore smiled coldly as Floyd continued his confession. You were always Dad's favorite. Floyd's voice cracked with decades of resentment. You got everything. We deserved it more. The company should have been mine too. The police moved in, and Floyd's resistance crumbled. As they led him away in handcuffs, Theodore noticed how small his brother looked. No longer the swaggering playboy, just a broken man facing the consequences of his choices. Inside the villa, paramedics attended to Kristen's injuries while Detective Woods personally took her statement. Theodore watched it all through his surveillance network, savoring each moment of their downfall. Mr. Hood, Melvin's voice held a note of admiration. That was impressive. You manipulated them perfectly. No, Melvin, Theodore replied. I just gave them the opportunity to show their true natures. People who betray once will always betray again. I simply made sure they betrayed each other instead of me. 6 months later, Theodore sat in his office at Hood Construction headquarters, reviewing the final reports from the legal team. The morning sun illuminated the skyline of the city his father had helped build, a legacy now secured and expanded under Theodore's ruthless guidance. The documents before him told the story of justice served. Floyd had been sentenced to life in prison for the murder of their father and the attempted murder of Kristen. His confession on the cliffs, combined with the mountain of evidence Theodore had accumulated, had made the prosecution's case airtight. Kristen, true to Theodore's word, had received a 20-year sentence in a minimum security facility in exchange for her comprehensive testimony. Her detailed account of the murder plot, the embezzlement scheme, and Guillermo Carey's involvement had provided the foundation for a major federal investigation. Sarah entered with the morning papers. Sir, the headlines are all about the Carey organization takedown. Theodore scanned the articles with satisfaction. The Joint Task Force had dismantled Guillermo's criminal empire piece by piece, although the man himself had disappeared, exactly as Theodore had anticipated. Sometimes the most effective way to destroy an enemy was to let them escape, forcing them to live in perpetual fear of discovery. A knock at his door announced Detective Woods' arrival. She entered without waiting for permission, her expression a mix of professional respect and personal wariness. Quite a neat bow you've tied on everything, she remarked, declining Theodore's offered seat. Floyd confessing on camera, Kristen turning state's evidence, Carey's organization in ruins. Almost too perfect. Sometimes justice prevails. Detective, Theodore's smile was predatory. Coffee? No, thank you. She studied him carefully. You orchestrated all of this, didn't you? Set them up to turn on each other? That's quite an accusation. Theodore poured himself a cup. Are you suggesting I somehow made my brother and wife confess to murder? Made them attempt to kill each other? Made them embezzle millions from my company? No, Valerie replied. I'm suggesting you knew exactly how they would react when cornered. You played them like chess pieces. An interesting theory. Theodore sipped his coffee. Would you like cream or sugar? The detective declined with a knowing look. Some questions were better left unasked, and some cups better left undrunk. I've learned a lot from this case, Valerie said, moving toward the door. About patience. About revenge. About how the most dangerous predators aren't the ones who use violence. They're the ones who use the law itself as a weapon. An interesting perspective, Theodore replied. I prefer to think of it as justice. My father's murder has been avenged. The guilty have been punished, and the company he built is stronger than ever. After she left, Theodore opened his desk drawer and removed an old photograph, Bernard Hood standing proudly in front of their first major construction project. He placed it carefully on his desk, angled so it overlooked the city. You taught me to be strong, he murmured to the image, to protect what's ours. But you never learned that lesson yourself. You kept forgiving Floyd, kept giving him chances, and it got you killed. Theodore turned to his computer, accessing the new security protocols Cora had implemented. Every transaction now required multiple authorizations. Every contract underwent rigorous verification. The weaknesses that Floyd and Kristen had exploited no longer existed. He'd also established the Bernard Hood Foundation, dedicated to helping families affected by addiction and fraud. It was a fitting tribute, using the instruments of his revenge to prevent others from following Floyd's path. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Sir? The board is ready for your presentation on the new development project. Theodore straightened his tie and gathered his materials. He had a company to run, projects to oversee, empires to build. The game of revenge was over, one with the same methodical precision he applied to every aspect of his life. As he walked to the boardroom, employees nodded respectfully, perhaps with a touch of fear. They'd all witnessed how thoroughly he destroyed those who betrayed him. The lesson wasn't lost on anyone. Theodore Hood protected what was his, and he never, ever forgave betrayal. The company would thrive under his leadership, expanding beyond even his father's dreams. But more importantly, it would be secure. Because everyone now understood exactly what happened to those who crossed Theodore Hood. They destroyed themselves, never realizing they were merely pieces in his grand design. Some questions were indeed better left unasked, and some cups better left undrunk. But the most important lesson was the simplest. Betrayal carried consequences, and Theodore Hood always collected his debts. Epilogue. 10 years later, Theodore Hood stood at the podium in front of Hood Construction's new headquarters, addressing the crowd gathered for the building's inauguration. At 52, his presence commanded even more authority than before, success having honed his predatory edge to razor sharpness. This tower represents more than just corporate expansion, he announced to the assembled media and business leaders. It represents resilience. 10 years ago, this company faced an internal threat that could have destroyed everything my father built. Instead, we emerged stronger. Sarah Martinez, now COO of Hood Construction, watched from the side stage. She'd risen through the ranks after proving her loyalty during the crisis, becoming Theodore's most trusted executive. The company had quadrupled in size under their joint leadership, expanding across 3 continents. After the ceremony, Theodore met with Cora Bennett in his new office. She transformed the company's financial security systems into an industry standard, consulting for major corporations while maintaining her role as Hood Construction's chief financial advisor. The quarterly numbers exceed projections by 30%, Cora reported, sliding a tablet across his desk. The Bernard Hood Foundation has also expanded its reach. We're now helping over 10,000 families affected by addiction and fraud annually. Theodore nodded, pulling up another file on his computer. And our other investments? Cora understood his meaning. They'd maintained careful surveillance of both Floyd and Kristen over the years, ensuring their punishment remained absolute. Floyd's appeal was denied last month, she said. His 7th attempt. He's still in maximum security after that failed escape attempt 3 years ago. The psychological evaluation describes him as completely broken. He spends most days in the prison library, writing rambling letters to regulatory agencies about corporate corruption. None of them are coherent enough to warrant investigation. And Kristen? Still in the minimum security facility in California. She's eligible for parole in 5 years, But Cora paused, checking her notes. The prison psychiatrist reports severe paranoia. She's convinced every cup of coffee might be poisoned. Refuses to drink anything she hasn't personally sealed and stored. The irony isn't lost on the staff. Theodore's smile was cold. The foundation makes annual donations to both facilities. Anonymous, of course. I want them to have every opportunity to reflect on their choices. Detective Woods retired last year, Cora continued. She still consults occasionally on complex fraud cases. She's never stopped watching you, you know? Convinced you orchestrated everything. Smart woman. Theodore turned to the window. And Guillermo Carey? Still missing. The rumors place him in different countries every few months. He's burning through his hidden accounts faster than expected. Apparently, living in constant fear of discovery is expensive. A knock at the door announced Melvin Head's arrival. He'd parlayed his work for Theodore into a thriving security consulting business, though he maintained a special relationship with Hood Construction. The new surveillance protocols are online, Melvin reported. Every employee, contractor, and partner is monitored according to their risk assessment level. We've also upgraded the AI analysis systems to detect behavioral patterns indicating potential betrayal. Theodore approved. After Floyd and Kristen's attempt to destroy his company, he'd turned Hood Construction into a fortress. Every transaction was tracked, every relationship analyzed, every potential threat identified and neutralized before it could develop. Roger Connor called this morning, Sarah announced, entering with Theodore's afternoon schedule. He's retiring, selling his security firm. He wanted to thank you for your business over the years. Send him something appropriate, Theodore instructed. His help was invaluable during the hunt. Later that afternoon, Theodore visited St. Michael's Cemetery. His father's grave was immaculately maintained, fresh flowers delivered weekly. The headstone had been replaced with black granite, matching the new Hood Construction logo. You were right about so many things, Dad, Theodore spoke quietly. But you were wrong about forgiveness. Mercy doesn't build empires. It destroys them. His phone buzzed, a notification from the prison monitoring system. Floyd had attempted to make another unauthorized phone call, probably trying to contact journalists again. The attempt had been blocked, of course. Every aspect of Floyd's imprisonment was carefully controlled, ensuring his suffering remained precise and perpetual. That evening, Theodore hosted a dinner for his executive team in his penthouse apartment. The view of the city spread out below them, Hood Construction's new tower dominating the skyline. Sarah presented the expansion plans for the next decade. New markets, new acquisitions, new opportunities to extend Theodore's control. A toast, Theodore raised his glass of water. He still never drank anything he hadn't personally secured. To consequences, the executives raised their glasses, none of them missing the meaning. They'd all witnessed what happened to those who betrayed Theodore Hood. The lesson had become corporate legend, whispered in boardrooms across the industry. Cross Theodore Hood, and he wouldn't just destroy you. He'd orchestrate your own self-destruction, leaving you alive to endure the consequences of your betrayal. After dinner, Theodore reviewed the weekly reports from his surveillance network. Floyd's prison records showed increasing signs of psychological deterioration. The recent death of his cellmate, officially ruled a suicide, had pushed him further into paranoid delusions. Kristen's file was equally satisfying. Her once brilliant mind had turned against her, transforming her minimum security imprisonment into a self-imposed hell of fear and suspicion. She developed elaborate rituals around food and drink, convinced that every meal might contain the same poisons she'd once used against others. Theodore's phone lit up with a message from Detective Woods. Even in retirement, she couldn't resist occasionally probing for weaknesses in his perfect revenge. Heard about Floyd's latest appeal, her message read. Still maintaining your perfect record of orchestrated justice? Theodore typed his reply carefully. Justice is its own reward, Detective. Coffee sometime? Her response was quick. Some cups are better left undrunk. He smiled, appreciating their ongoing game. She knew what he'd done, how he'd manipulated events to destroy his enemies while appearing legally untouchable. But knowing wasn't the same as proving, and Theodore had ensured there would never be proof. A final report arrived from Cora, the Bernard Hood Foundation's latest initiative. They'd opened a new rehabilitation center, specializing in treating white-collar criminals with gambling addictions. The facility's location offered a clear view of the prison where Floyd served his life sentence. Another small touch of psychological torture, ensuring the consequences of betrayal remained ever present. Theodore ended his day in his home office, reviewing security footage from both prisons. Floyd paced his cell, muttering about conspiracies and betrayal. Kristen sat alone in the prison cafeteria, methodically testing each bite of food for poison. Their lives had become monuments to the price of crossing Theodore Hood. The new Hood construction tower stood illuminated against the night sky, visible from every corner of the city. It served as both testament to Theodore's success and warning to anyone considering betrayal. The company had emerged from crisis stronger than ever, its security systems and loyalty protocols becoming industry standards. Theodore's legacy was secure, built not just on business success, but on the object lesson of Floyd and Kristen's destruction. Their fates served as a perpetual reminder. In Theodore Hood's world, betrayal carried consequences that lasted far beyond the initial punishment. He transformed their own guilt and paranoia into weapons, ensuring they would spend their lives tortured by the very traits that had led them to betray him. The city lights reflected off his office windows as Theodore reviewed plans for the company's next expansion. The future stretched out before him, full of opportunities for growth and dominance. He had transformed his father's company into an empire, secured it against all threats, and established a legacy of power that would endure for generations. And somewhere in the night, Floyd and Kristen endured their endless punishment, living proof that Theodore Hood never forgot a betrayal and never, ever offered forgiveness. Their destruction had been complete, yet he'd ensured they lived to experience every moment of their downfall. It was, he reflected, the perfect revenge, complete, sustainable, and entirely legal. Some questions were indeed better left unasked, and some cups better left undrunk. But the most valuable lesson was written in the shattered lives of those who had dared to betray Theodore Hood. Consequences were forever, and revenge was a dish best served perpetually. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.